Well, if there's one thing K-pop fans like to do, it's send hate. The hate doesn't need to be justified, it doesn't need to be evidenced, or constructive criticism, or anything like that. It's almost always just hate for the sake of hate, and any constructive criticism that's given in good faith is drowned in the hate and fan wars. And if there's one hot take that isn't actually a hot take about K-pop, it's that a lot of people, especially the older fans, wish that K-pop fans wouldn't be so quick to send hate. But that's never going to happen, so why even bother dreaming? On a completely unrelated note, this is Kaachi, and I'm here to set the record straight about them. Kaachi are an infamous group. Whether you call them K-pop, UK K-pop, or K-pop inspired, or if you just call them trash, it doesn't really matter. They're a group with some level of K-pop adjacency, and a fascinating group at that. Even 5 years after they went viral in K-pop, there's still a plethora of misinformation floating around about them, and they still get talked about like they're the scum of the earth, even after we've seen time and time again that not only are they nowhere near as bad as people claim they are, but there are also far worse things out there in this industry than a bunch of untrained semi-idols who may or may not have said one Koreaboo-ish thing in the past. I think Kaachi are so fascinating because they're an example of how vicious the K-pop industry can be, and an example of how often ordinary young people who want to pursue their dreams can get caught between fans and companies. They're also a great example of how these young people can continue to grow and improve despite the odds and hate. Oh, also, we debate all the time who paved the way and whether it was one group or multiple groups, and whether paved the way is a term that should even be used. But I think that Kaachi, and to a lesser extent Rania and SB19, definitively paved the way for groups like Cat's Eye, Black Swan, Dear Alice and Vicha, and I'll show you why. Even beyond that, the astounding degrees of change the group and members went through from inception to disbandment to the current day are crazy. Hence, I want to talk about them and make a retrospective, since it's now 5 years since their debut. Happy anniversary, Kaachi! In this video, I'll discuss the history of the group, talking about their inception and creation, changes made to their concept over time, their controversies, their disbandment, and where they are now. I'll also take a look at whether they were really as bad as people said, and we'll discuss their legacy and impact on the current market for international K-pop groups. Then I'll discuss some key takeaways, such as the prevalence of Koreabooism, racism, and misogyny in the K-pop landscape. I'll give a blanket trigger warning for this video for misogyny, online bullying and death threats, mentions of racism, and Oli London. Yep, Oli London. Sorry in advance. So with that, let's get into it, with a look first at the relatively short but very complex history of Kaachi. Kaachi was a 4, then 3, then 2-member girl group under Front Row Records, a British company which I can't find much about online. It seems to be a K-pop music distributor in the UK, and they have a Facebook page which advertises K-pop concerts in the UK and other events. Kaachi debuted on April 15th, 2020 and disbanded on February 28th, 2023, a very different group from when they debuted. But to understand just how different, we need to go all the way back to the start of 2020, when the group was first conceptualized and formed. We don't know a lot about the conceptualization of Kaachi outside of their original public lineup, which included 4 members: Nicole, Danny, Chunso, and KG. However, we do have one important piece of media, a video by Ploopy678, someone who you may know by now is one of my favourite YouTube creators. Ploopy's videos on K-pop controversies have been super helpful for several of my other videos, and I love the content she puts out. Fun fact for those of you keeping count, she's yet another person who inspired me to make this channel and this type of content. Kaachi did release a decent amount of pre-debut content through their channels and their company, Front Row. However, all of this footage seems to have disappeared or otherwise been deleted. Front Row's channel, which used to be Kaachi's channel, now only includes 5 Kaachi-related videos from 4 to 5 years ago, then has a content gap and only started producing content again in November 2023, when the channel started posting K-pop dance tutorials and exercises. Kaachi's member Instagram accounts have been deleted. This drought was so bad that even r/Kpop help were unable to help. Mind you, many people there probably don't even consider Kaachi a K-pop group, so that may have been a contributing factor. There are a few videos floating around, such as the mini documentary made about the group by Channel 4, but there's still a lot of content missing. Anyway, why is Ploopy important? Well, Ploopy made a video about Kaachi, and unlike her other videos, which look at a controversy from some degree of both emotional and temporal distance, the Kaachi video was unique, because Ploopy was, in fact, asked to be a member of Kaachi. Insane. Ploopy's video on Kaachi is unique among videos on Kaachi because not only does she look at the group with a lens of empathy and constructive criticism, not hate, but she also is able to give some insight into just how and why the group was so questionable, through recounting and offering commentary on her messages with the group's leader Nicole, who was the mouthpiece through which the group and company tried to recruit her. Considering the fact that most of Kaachi's contents have now been deleted, Ploopy's video has become even more important for documenting the history of the group, as it is one of the only videos still standing. I reached out to Ploopy to ask if she still had her research document from the Kaachi video. Since her research documents are extensive and well made, I thought this would be a great way to find out more. However, she unfortunately doesn't still have it and was unable to offer any more insight into the deleted content, outside of mentioning that she thought the original NCT concept was likely because, as far as she could remember, the members were in university at the time. That said, she specified she wasn't sure of details and may have remembered incorrectly, but considering the Channel 4 documentary includes Danny talking about her part-time retail job at the time, and Danny later talked about leaving uni around the time she left Kaachi, this adds up. The lack of information Ploopy had was disappointing but understandable, and at the end of the day, Ploopy's video still gives us a wealth of information we otherwise wouldn't have about the group, and is massively useful even without her research document. I also reached out to Nicole on Instagram, but as I expected, she didn't respond. It seems that Kaachi were in conceptual development at the end of 2019 and the start of 2020, when Front Row wanted to create a global K-pop girl group. The most interesting things we know from this time is that 1. The members were largely sourced from K-pop cover group Yujin, and 2. According to Nicole's messages with Ploopy, the group were actually supposed to have an NCT-type concept, with several subunits, a expanding/rotating lineup, and so on. However, as we know, that didn't actually work out. That said, I find it insane that Kaachi was supposed to have this NCT or Luna-type concept. On one hand, it makes sense, since they were sourced from a cover group. Cover groups often have rotating members for performances and would have access to a wide range of members. On the other hand, it's crazy how not only did we never hear a peep out of Kaachi officially about being anything like NCT, but Kaachi in the end was so distanced from the NCT concept that without this Ploopy video, you'd never be able to tell they were supposed to have this concept. Every time I get reminded that NCT Kaachi was supposed to exist, I feel like I feel the conceptual whiplash fresh over and over again. Anyway, let's put that aside and talk about the best timeline I can establish with resources available to me on the internet. In roughly October 2019, Front Row Records is established. In her messages with Ploopy, Nicole says that the founder is a Korean woman, probably Kaachi's manager Monica, who was working in music distribution and wanted to try something new, thus creating the company and Kaachi. The company then recruited talent through groups like Yujin, and we ended up with the original 4 Kaachi members, Nicole, Chunso, Danny and KG. KG left the group on the 31st of January for unknown reasons, although considering the blurred out portions of Nicole's messages to Ploopy, it's likely there were some very personal reasons for her leaving. This is similarly seen with Miso, who was KG's replacement, and she left the group in March 2020, only a month and a half after she joined, and with only a month left to go until the group's debut. Miso did, however, participate in one performance of their debut song, Your Turn, at Super K-pop Weekends in London. If members leaving isn't already ringing alarm bells for you, I don't know what to say. And it gets worse. Nicole's messages to Ploopy asking if she wanted to be part of the group were sent on the 8th of March, as Miso was in the process of leaving, and proclaimed that they were going to film their music video in the coming week, a statement which understandably set off alarm bells for Ploopy, being one of the reasons she decided not to join the group. So, as Ploopy describes in her video, this means that Kaachi found their fourth member Coco likely within a week, and she was announced as a member on the 28th of March 2020. After all of this, Kaachi debuted on the 15th of April 2020 with their first single, Your Turn. Considering this insanely compacted timeline, it's no wonder that not only was there almost no footage of Coco in the music video, but also that the music video and song seemed so rushed, and that the members were so out of sync with each other. In fact, the Channel 4 documentary about the group shows some of this training process, and how short the timeline was. We see that they were literally still creating the choreography the day before the music video shoot, and it seems like the members themselves were in charge of some of this choreography. Considering they're not choreographers, this is another red flag. Coco, of course, seems shy and is further behind in learning the choreography. Unsurprising considering how late she was added. We even see her practicing on set alone on the day of the shoot. This documentary is just weird in general. It includes Monica, their manager, and like I said, presumably the founder of Front Row, giving them tips on stage presence and other things. But she also mentions how short the training and practice period was, and how little it was compared to in Korea, and this self-awareness just makes me ask, why? Why would you do that if you knew it would have such a detrimental effect on the final product, and if you, presumably, knew it would be torn apart by fans? Mind you, the documentary has a host of very questionable decisions and isn't very well made in general, so we should take it and everything it says with a grain of salt. Now let's actually talk about the members individually, because the members, namely their lack of K-pop training experience and their lack of Koreanness, were a big topic of discussion at their debut. Nicole is Spanish and was born on August 25th, 1999. She was the leader of the group, in every sense of the word. Not only did she seem to be heavily involved in the group's creation, she was also their mouthpiece, seen as she was the one who reached out to Ploopy. She was also the one who seemed to promote the group the most, for instance through reaching out to and collaborating with Johnny, a character who comes into our story later on. She and Chunso were original members and stayed until the disbandment of the group. Additionally, Nicole was the most experienced and arguably the most skilled of the members. She was the main dancer of the group as well as main vocalist and was lead rapper. When I say it often looked like she was the one holding the group together, I mean it. She seemed to be by far the most passionate about the project, potentially even more so than Monica, and became the face of the group. Nicole had been trained in and participated in many dance activities throughout her life, including sports gymnastics, urban dance, hip-hop and jazz dance, and she had competed with and joined several dance groups and companies. She was even a backup dancer for K-pop soloist Miso when she had come to London. Let's just say that Nicole had a considerable amount of experience as a dancer, even if most of that wasn't K-pop dance specifically. Nicole managed to avoid some amount of hate directed at the other non-Korean members because her skill level and passion levels were considered passable by most netizens. Next, Coco, the last member to be added to the group only a few days before the music video filming, according to Ploopy's timeline. Coco was born on the 5th of January 1994, being a lead vocalist and sub-rapper in the group. She also had the depressing distinction of being the only actual Korean member in the group. Thus, she avoided the vast majority of the hate that befell the other members of the group and was basically held up by many fans as the best member and the only valid member, which is kind of crazy. Coco had been trained in Korean traditional dance and had been dancing for about 16 years when she joined Kaachi. She was criticised for her vocals by a few people, but this died down quickly since she was Korean, and therefore in the eyes of many K-pop fans, untouchable in the group. Because of this, she was actually often painted as the poor and helpless Korean victim of the vicious Koreaboo Kaachi members, and many decided she was a shield to the other members. To be fair to them, she was often used in this way, especially in the documentary, which made her the face of the group. And Coco, along with Nicole, was sent to a lot of interviews and other things to explain the group and give them an air of authority. However, this attitude that she was a shield and nothing else led to other members getting even more hate, and Coco being held up and almost deified in comparison, as well as infantilized in my opinion. You would think, considering she was 25 to 26 at the time she joined Kaachi and had been living in London for several years and had years of dance training, that she would be able to make her own decisions and hold her own in this group. But no, in the eyes of many Kaachi haters, she was a poor, shy, untrained Korean woman whose sole purpose was to make this group look a little bit less like a bunch of Koreaboos. Ew. Next, Danny, one of the two members who bore the brunt of the hatred of K-pop fans. In fact, I would say from what I saw that Danny was the most hated member of the group. Danny was born on August 26, 1998, and was a main rapper, dancer, and sub-vocalist in the group. She had been trained in several dance styles for about 14 years when she joined the group, and had also been a backup dancer for Miso. Danny received a lot of hate because she was British, and didn't really have any claim to being worthy of being in a K-pop group in the eyes of K-pop fans. Many also felt that she was a weak link talent-wise, and since she had injuries which often left her unable to dance fully, she wasn't as energetic, hence people jumped on her. Danny has spoken in several videos about how much difficulty she had adjusting to rapping and singing in Kaachi, and this adjustment from dancing to dancing, singing and rapping at the same time was no doubt a reason why the members seemed lacking to many, as I'll discuss later. Honestly, I do think that Danny was the least skilled member of the group, and as I said, her energy was often lacking compared to the other members, but she definitely didn't deserve the huge amounts of hatred and vitriol thrown at her. Next, Chunso, the other of the two members who received the most backlash from K-pop fans. Chunso, real name Ruth, was born on May 28, 2000, and was the group's main rapper, lead vocalist, visual and lead dancer. She was also apparently the group's centre, but I don't feel like she was ever treated as a centre, so She received backlash for having a Korean stage name, and for having this stage name and being in this group while not being Korean, and apparently not being skilled enough to be in the group. Chunso is half Filipino and half Spanish. Her K-Profile's profile actually explains her stage name. Ruth was considered too hard to pronounce in Korean, so she picked a stage name. Her favourite group, Teen Top, have the fandom name Chunsa, or Angel. Her favourite member in the group is Chunji, and his birthday is the 5th of October, or 1005, one day away from 1004, which is apparently also pronounced Chunsa. Dang, that was a bit convoluted. I feel like all she really needed was the fandom name Chunsa, but this is K-pop logic we're dealing with here. I think it's really sad that everyone bashed her for having this Korean stage name, considering she only did it to make it easier for Korean people to name her, which I felt was pretty considerate of her. Chunso had been dancing for about 6 years when she joined Kaachi, and her K-Profiles recounts a sweet story where she was too scared to ever tell anyone she liked K-pop in fear of being made fun of, a fear understandable to many K-pop fans, before meeting Nicole, who was happy to share her music tastes and thus made Chunso cry. Considering this, it's no surprise that they were the two members who stuck together through everything, from the first formation of the group to their current state in 2025. Anyway, with that nice story, let's get back to a less nice story. Back to your turn. K-pop fans hated it, or more like despised it. There were countless videos floating around on the internet. People ridiculed the members of Kaachi and their company. They said that they themselves would never have the nerve to pretend to be a K-pop group. They called the members Koreaboos, they expressed sorrow for Coco, the only Korean member, having to put up with this group. They said the music was trash and the mixing was worse. They pointed out issues with vocals, editing, choreography, dance skills, and more. You can still find a billion videos like this online discussing the group, and I'm sure you can imagine what they're like, so I won't discuss them here, but let's just say it was bad. It was a never-ending hate train for the members of Kaachi, and to make matters worse, rumours started to spread about the group, as well as a few scandals that were arguably based in fact. Let's start with the facts. In a dance video where the Kaachi members were covering various songs in various styles, someone, we're unsure whether it was an audience member or a staff member, told them to dance lazily, quote, like Jennie from Blackpink. This video no longer exists in its original state, so it's hard to verify who said this in which context, and whether this was before or after Kaachi were actually formed. However, we can see from emails later sent by their manager that their manager claims that the statements were made by a cameraman several months before the group was actually formed. However, this didn't matter to K-pop fans. Although they were understandably upset that this comment had been made, this anger was, as we see often, directed not at the company or even the cameraman, but instead at the girls of Kaachi, and claims were made that the girls themselves had called Jennie lazy, which was in no way true. Hence, Kaachi got lots of hate, death threats and more, which was, as I said, directed at something which was in no way their fault, as we will see more of with the other accusations. Kaachi released an apology for this on April 18th, 2020, but no one really liked it. I genuinely thought it was decent. It explained that it wasn't the fault of the actual members, and despite this being out of their control, they apologised and reiterated that they respect all artists and respect and admire Jennie. Speaking of, Kaachi also received hate for supposedly comparing themselves to Hwasa of Mamamoo. The accusations were that they thought they were as good as Hwasa, an immensely popular idol both then and now, but they in no way measured up to her in terms of beauty, skill and more, and thus were deluded. This was an incorrect accusation as well. This originally came from a clip of Miso saying that she was the, quote, Hwasa from Mamamoo of Kaachi. Now, as Ploopy very correctly explained, this didn't mean that she was actually comparing herself or her skill level to Hwasa, but instead saying that she occupied a similar niche in the group to the niche Hwasa occupied in Mamamoo, possibly being more sensual and provocative. This is the same as literally anyone in any friend group calling themselves the something of that group. For instance, the mum of that group, the crazy uncle of the group, etc. Was this statement potentially questionable by Miso? Yes, definitely. But the fact of the matter was that not only was this a relatively tame statement, all things considered, but it was also made by an ex-member of the group and had never been said or endorsed by the debut members of the group. So again, the hate was massively exaggerated. There were also claims that 1, the group were under the same company as Oli London, and 2, that one or multiple of the members were friends with Oli London. These claims seemed to have come from the fact that Oli London was weirdly involved in Kaachi-related things around the time of their debut, and in the documentary was listed as a publicist for the group and can be seen on set. Weirdly enough, he was also listed as a K-pop star in the documentary, which is incredibly questionable and concerning, but there are 2 other actual pieces of evidence for these claims. First, Coco was featured in Oli London's Mirror Mirror music video pre-debut. And second, that Front Row had apparently worked with him in other ways and deleted that content later, but since it's deleted, I obviously can't find information about it. Hence, people assumed that Kaachi and Oli London were friends, which there's not a lot of proof for that, and I haven't seen Kaachi or Atti mention Oli London since. I don't know, people act like Kaachi and Oli London are just as bad as each other, but Oli London has been trying to steal people's identities and has turned into a transphobic alpha male, and Kaachi were just naive and undertrained, so I feel like one is far worse than the other. But their association with Oli London was definitely a huge strike against them, even after he turned on them and started accusing them and manager Monica of being ungrateful and cutting him off. Which, I mean, I would cut you out too, so I can't blame them for that. He made several accusations about the individual members, such as calling Danny miserable and saying the members have zero star power, and also about Monica, saying she is entitled, abusive, and more, and basically tried to get Kaachi cancelled, which for once unified the few people who still followed them in favour of Kaachi. I guess K-pop fans hated Kaachi, but they hated Oli London a lot more, as they should. This whole Oli London and Kaachi thing is interesting and slightly disturbing, and you can find several other videos about the relationship between them, which I will of course link in the description. But I won't discuss it here because not only do I have no desire to subject myself and you to more information about Oli London, but I also want to focus more on the history of Kaachi here, not on the bizarre and weird management issues they have with Oli London. Just accept this key takeaway that this is all really suspicious, and this was yet another one of the issues with Kaachi's management. Finally, the accusation that they were Koreaboos. The evidence for this is that they sang a tiny bit of Korean in their songs, despite seemingly not knowing the language, that they called themselves K-pop, despite not having gone through the K-pop training system or being affiliated with a Korean company or even having Korean members outside of Coco, and that Chunso's stage name was Chunso, which was a Korean name, not her real name. Hence, Chunso in particular was met with accusations of being a Koreaboo. But really, why would you not have a Korean stage name if you were in a Korean or Korean-inspired group? Anyway, there wasn't any actual evidence that any of them were Koreaboos, unless you considered what I listed to be evidence, which I don't. In the documentary, Danny even brings this to light and reinforces that the group members were, in fact, serious about what they were doing, and I have no reason to believe she was lying. I think the members well and truly proved that they were serious, even if the company wasn't serious about offering them the same training and support as the Korean training system. Next, rumours. There were tons of malicious rumours about the members of Kaachi which were created around their announcement and debut date. Why? Well, because K-pop fans are nasty and hate on anything new or unique. Let's start from the top. There was a rumour that a member, supposedly Miso from what I can gather, was shipping herself with Jungkook. Obviously there was no proof for this, but people ran with it regardless. Speaking of BTS, there were rumours that Kaachi would be releasing a debut album whose song titles were entirely plagiarised from BTS, and that they had started using the slogan I Blue You, an obvious copy of BTS's slogan I Purple You. There was no evidence for any of this, and in fact Kaachi never released anything other than singles, and not a single one of their songs or music videos was related to BTS's concepts in any way. Moving on, there were several accusations that their choreography plagiarized Blackpink's choreography. I can't find any evidence for this online, but I'm not surprised that there's none, since Blinks have been known to claim plagiarism over even the smallest things, like Lisa's Thai heritage or a singular choreography move. Next, claims that one of the group's members was a Bangchan auntie. No clue where this came from, but there's no evidence for it. Next, there were claims that Kaachi's fandom name was going to be Coochie, and that their light stick was basically going to be a dildo that lit up. This was so out of the realm of reality that I'm shocked that anyone actually believed it. And yet it was so prevalent of a belief that I still see people to this day who hear the name Kaachi and go, oh, wasn't that the group whose fandom name was Coochies? Insane. And at the end of the day, why was this rumour created? It was created to hate on the group for the sake of hating on them, and as yet another way to slut-shame women and show how misogynistic K-pop and K-pop fans really are. Oh dear. This fandom and lightstick debacle was even crazier to me because Kaachi had actually announced a fandom name online, which was easily available to anyone who wanted to fact-check these rumours. Their fandom name is UniK, and you can find easily online that they don't have an official lightstick. But as I've established in previous videos, the confirmation bias in K-pop is strong. During this time, Kaachi's Twitter account went on a hilarious rampage of posting all of the false rumours other users posted about them, pointing these rumours out to their followers as false, which didn't seem to have any effect since most of their followers at this time seemed to have been haters, and all of their comments were telling them to disband. Most of the links they posted to articles, other posts, and YouTube videos, such as statements by their manager, are now defunct and don't work. This was also just bizarre and unprofessional in general, so was an odd time in their Twitter's history. These rumours and the hate train were getting insanely bad, to the point that on the 29th of April their producer Monica had to upload a video which dismantled the claims against the group and members, and requested netizens to stop sending hate to the group and members. She also sent emails including to K-Buzz, a K-pop news channel which had made videos about Kaachi. The members of the group itself were also sent to do damage control. You can see one example of this through Celisa Moset's interview with Coco, where Coco, as I said earlier, was made the Korean face of the group. Despite my skepticism that Coco was chosen to do the interview for questionable reasons, and the weirdness of how Coco parrots what the CEO says, the video is still interesting, and Coco offers insight into how they're taking on constructive feedback and clarifies the rumours that were going around, as well as how she actually had no clue who Oli London actually was and didn't realise the gravity of who he was. This, combined with Shaliza pointing out the insane amount of hate Kaachi received in comparison with the amount of constructive criticism they received, meant that the comments had a far more positive outlook on the group. After this, well, it wasn't great. Your Turn got tons of attention and views, but not for any good reasons. One video that got a lot of attention and drastically changed the course of Kaachi's career was a video by Johnny, a K-pop cover artist and a producer, who made this video which received over 1.7 million views. The video was wonderfully made, and along with Ploopy is up there as one of the best pieces of Kaachi media, I think. In the video, Johnny apologises to Kaachi for believing the rumours about them, and this starts us off on a great note. The entirety of the video is the definition of constructive criticism. Johnny systematically dismantles Your Turn, pointing out both the positives and negatives of the song, and the ways in which it could be improved. At the end of the video, he remixes the song and creates his own cover, showing how much better it could have been if it was more polished. A lot of people really liked this. They also apologised in the comments for having believed the rumours about the group and having sent them hate, and they talked about how much they thought Johnny's version of the song was a massive improvement and actually made the song, good. A lot of people also encouraged Johnny to become a producer for the group since he had made such an impact on their music. And this kick-started Kaachi's relationship with Johnny, which seems to have continued to this day. Kaachi announced they would be having a comeback and released their second single, Photo Magic, on the 4th of November 2020. This song was far better received than Your Turn. It had a more sophisticated and polished concept, a gorgeous music video, the seemingly small budget for which was used to great effect. The girls' dancing and singing skills improved, and as we would expect, as they'd had more time to train together, they were more in sync too. The hate had died down a bit since most people who were hating for the sake of hating had got bored and moved on. The song was generally better and more polished, and a lot of fans attributed this to Johnny. Johnny was rumoured to have helped produce Photo Magic, but I can't find him in the song's credits. I think it was more likely that he had just some creative influence on the company in a less solid way. He did, however, feature in the music video for the song, and did participate in the production of the Spanish version of Your Turn, I think, which was released later that year. The music video has been deleted, but thankfully for us was saved on the Wayback Machine, although it does load very slowly and is sadly low quality. Photo Magic was also marketed as a pre-release single, so supposedly part of an upcoming mini-album, but said mini-album never came out. Speaking of the Spanish version of Your Turn, this and the release of Photo Magic shows how Kaachi changed. The NCT concept was far in the past, and even the K-pop aspect of the group had changed. They were no longer promoted exclusively as the UK's first K-pop group, and now were basically just Kaachi. Kaachi needed to prove that they could actually bring something to the industry, and they did indeed have something unique. They had two Spanish members. Nicole, who, as I mentioned, was at this point and throughout their whole history basically the glue keeping the group together, is Spanish, and Chunso is half Spanish. Hence, as we can see with the lyrics of Photo Magic and the release of the Spanish versions of Your Turn and Photo Magic, the group and the company had made the shift to becoming more of a multinational group than an exclusively K-pop group. And I think this was, one, probably the best choice they could have made, and two, the thing that sets Kaachi apart from everyone else, and one of the reasons I fell in love with them. Over their next few releases, which were very sporadic, Kaachi transitioned to this new model, where their songs used a combination of Spanish, English, and Korean, and had a more upbeat love yourself message, something we saw a hint of at debut with Your Turn. And I think this period from Photo Magic onwards really was when Kaachi came into their own. The girls had all improved their skills massively, the music was better, the direction was better, and they were performing bigger and better every time. The haters were mostly gone, and only their fans remained. On the 23rd of July 2021, Front Row Records made an announcement that Danny's contract had expired and she had left the group. This was arguably the start of the group's downfall. I say arguably because some people would say they had been falling since the start, and because I personally think they released their best music after Danny left. Kaachi continued as a 3-member group for a while, releasing 3 new singles. The One Thing on the 19th of August, Extra Special on the 2nd of September, and Get Up on the 25th of October. Get Up was actually a remake of the Baby Vox song, and I'm not sure how they got the rights for it. Also, I'd only ever heard of Baby Vox through the Guy scandal, and heard the Kaachi version of the song before the Baby Vox version, so when Baby Vox performed Get Up at Mama 2024, let's just say I was very confused. Whoops. After their comeback with Get Up, Kaachi actually went on a Korean variety show, Never Stop Being a Fan. This showed several things. Their dance skills, which were never bad but had improved, especially in terms of synchronization, and also showed how much their Korean and their confidence had improved. It also showed how the K-pop industry itself seemed to have opened up to seeing Kaachi as K-pop. In the video, Coco obviously takes on a pseudo-leader role as she is fluent in Korean, and Chunso and Nicole speak English when asked to answer more complicated questions, but it's still, in my opinion, heartwarming to see how far they had come and how much they appreciated their ability to try new things with Kaachi. The comments are largely positive and appreciate how they've developed and are being recognised for positive reasons. Never Stop Being a Fan also revealed many things about the members and the development of the group, which I have discussed and will discuss later. It's no surprise that after a year and a half of working together, the 3 members left at that time had become far more in sync and interacted better with each other. This was just natural as they improved their skills and trained more together, but it was still good to see them proving the haters wrong. And this, unfortunately, was pretty much the end of the line for Kaachi. On the 2nd of September 2022, it was announced that Coco had left the group. Nicole and Chunso continued as a duo for several months, but released no new music, and they both left Front Row Records and the group disbanded on the 28th of February 2023. So that was the end of Kaachi, but not the end of the members. 3 of the members, Nicole, Chunso and Coco, created their own independent group, Atti, and re-debuted on August 11th, 2023. They released the pre-release single Blue on the 11th of August, and their EP Peaches on the 6th of October, featuring Blue and their other track Regeneration. It seems that Johnny worked with them on these tracks, and the members also participated by writing Regeneration. Atti released a few videos on their YouTube channel, but they haven't released anything since December 2023. Their most recent Instagram post was in August 2024. Kaachi's Instagram and other accounts have been left up, but left to rot, and it seems that their individual accounts, like I mentioned earlier, have been deleted. Their YouTube account was turned into Front Row's YouTube account, which, as I previously mentioned, now occasionally posts K-pop related videos but nothing to do with Kaachi. Since their YouTube channel was where most of their content was kept, including pre-debut videos and manager statements, and most of this has been deleted to make way for the Front Row channel, most of Kaachi's proper content is now lost, which is a shame, since it really showed their development as people and as a group. Interestingly, in May 2024, Front Row posted a music video for a song called Our Candle, with Nicole, Chunso and Johnny. Fans felt this was very odd, and it really was odd. Months after Kaachi had disbanded and the members had left the company, they just uploaded this music video for some reason and didn't even say Kaachi in the title, just Nicole and Chunso. To make matters even weirder was the caption, which reads, "This song was created in 2022 during the production of the documentary The Gill, which received numerous awards at international film festivals last year. It marks the final project of the group Kaachi's journey. May this song serve as a last gift from Front Row Global Limited, supporting the future endeavours of former Kaachi members Chunso and Nicole." The description also gives thanks, saying, quote, "Special thanks to director Jung Run-ho and Lone Wolf aka Wink for motivating and encouraging me to not give up on this project. Aya Source. These credits extend gratitude to all those involved in the production of the remake Music Road." A very odd and confusing description if you ask me, and even weirder considering it was recorded in 2022 but released in 2024, and even more than that, what happened to Kaachi's mini-album? They announced there would be a mini-album that Photo Magic would be a part of, but this never came out and I don't think there was a cancellation announcement. The perils of being under a small company, I guess. These days, Front Row Records seems to have become a music distribution company, which makes sense if the founder originally worked in music distribution. Their channels mostly put out small amounts of content about concerts in Europe and the UK, and more dance tutorials and exercises. The exception to this was the above-mentioned music video they released with Johnny, Chunso and Nicole. So, what have the members been up to these days? Well, it's a little hard to tell considering their lack of activity on social media. Their K profiles list activities they've done outside of the group, but I'm unsure if these things were done before they were members of Kaachi/Ati, during that time, or afterwards, so I'll just discuss them anyway. Nicole was one of the last two members in Kaachi, and after she left Kaachi in early 2023, joined Ati. Ati haven't disbanded but are inactive. Nicole's last post on Instagram is from the 23rd of November 2024, with someone, presumably a boyfriend, in Norway. Her Twitter is private and it doesn't seem like she has any other social media accounts. Coco was, as far as I could tell, always the most popular member of Kaachi, probably because she was Korean. She has been up to a bunch by the looks of things. Her last Instagram post was from December 2023, and her last YouTube video was a vlog from March 2023 of her visiting a K-pop exhibit in London. This exhibit was at the V&A Museum in London, where she ran a few dance classes. On her Instagram, she's also listed herself as the general manager of ESEA Music, a, quote, London-based community for the UK's East and Southeast Asian music industry. This group seems to be involved in diversity and promotion projects for Southeast Asian and East Asian music artists, and are active, which is nice to see. This is also unsurprising since I think Coco also worked in music distribution before joining Kaachi, and possibly even worked as part of Monica's team, which could have been how she was scouted. Next, Danny. Danny was the first member to leave the group in July 2021. Her last Instagram post on her public Instagram was around this time, and her other Instagram is private. Her Twitter hasn't been active since mid-2024 when she posted about having trouble accessing TikTok. Danny is still semi-active on her YouTube channel and posts every few months, mostly song covers and vlogs. She also has a SoundCloud which doesn't seem to be active. Danny released a Q&A shortly after she left Kaachi, which included a segment on her involvement with Nicole and the group and other fun facts, such as how she started learning Korean. She had been learning Japanese but had struggled with the alphabet, and of course the Korean alphabet is far easier to read, so she just switched languages. At this point, she said she was able to speak conversational Korean but could understand a lot more than she could speak. Anyway, what did she say about Kaachi and related topics? She said that she had joined Eugene in 2012 and was basically one of the founders of the group, and that she had met Nicole and Chunso in 2015. She had run into Nicole at a b-boying crew, and Nicole had introduced her to Chunso. She then said that she was scouted to be in Kaachi by Nicole, Chunso and another member, presumably KG. During their debut, she said that the worst thing was the number of rumours and the amount of misinformation going around, which she had no power to combat. But it seems like she's adjusted decently to it and understands that some people just do not and will not like her. She said that she enjoyed her time in the group and most benefited from the vocal training and from learning that she was a more resilient person than she'd previously thought. She also took the time to clarify a few things. For instance, saying that she didn't leave the group because of the hate, and also that she had missed out on a Kaachi dance video because she was busy at uni, not because of her injuries, as was previously speculated. She also said that she didn't leave the group because of disagreements with the girls, didn't leave to go solo, and didn't leave because she had finished uni, but because of disagreements with the company when it came to contract renewals. She also clarified that she and the other members still got along, and that there would be no chance of her returning to the group. So overall, it seems like Dani is pretty well adjusted about her time in the group, and has moved on and is enjoying life to the fullest. A lot of comments are interesting to read and talk about how terrible Front Row is. The way Dani talks in her video, it seems like Front Row basically misinterpreted something she said and almost kicked her out of the group. So it's understandable to see people take this stance. I'm also not really surprised to hear that something like this happened, considering, like I said, a lot of people following the group really didn't like Dani. As I said earlier, as the British member of the group, she basically became the face of Kaachi being interpreted as Koreaboos, along with Chunso's stage name. Anyway, there's also, as you'd expect, lots of speculation in the comments, and a bit of Johnny hate, which is very unusual among Kaachi fans. A lot of people are also talking about how Front Row worked with Oli London and then deleted all of the video evidence and denied they worked with them, which honestly I would believe, especially since Coco was in Oli's music video. Although Kaachi did end up with a solid fan base, everyone hated any association they had with Oli London, even their most diehard of fans. Because, as I said earlier, there weren't any huge objectively terrible issues with Kaachi, but there are with Oli London. Alright, moving on to our last member, Chunso. Chunso and Nicole were with each other the whole time in Kaachi and then in Ati. Chunso hasn't been as active as the other members. She's only posted one YouTube video and her last Instagram post is from June 2024. Other than that, where she showed a bunch of travel pictures, I'm unsure what she's up to these days. So there we go. That's the full timeline of Kaachi and Front Row Records, from the members' dance training as children to the creation of Front Row and Kaachi, to disbandment and the debut and then inactivity of Ati. So with that done, let's take a look. Were Kaachi really as bad as everyone thought they were? No, they weren't, but you probably knew I'd say that. And it's not surprising because K-pop fans have a habit of exaggerating, and when someone says, "That's the worst dancing I've ever seen," you know chances are it's not actually the worst dancing. And that's exactly how it worked with Kaachi. I was actually shocked looking at their debut stage with Miso, which I'd never seen before. The comments were acting like this was truly the worst and most delusional thing to ever happen, while the performance was actually perfectly competent and even good at times. When doing research for this video, I was surprised to find out that all of the members had an extensive dance history, because if you were to listen to netizens at their debut, you would think that they'd just been some random geeky K-pop fans plucked off the street because they desired to be idols more than they had common sense. But, as I mentioned in their profiles, each of the members had been dancing for a very long time and most of them had experience in multiple styles. So why did Kaachi's dance look so messy at debut? It's extremely simple, although there are several factors. First, Coco was only added to the group a few days before they filmed the music video for My Turn, so had less time to practice the dance and thus would also have had less time to practice with the other members to get in sync. This lack of time issue also applies to the other members to a lesser extent. Kaachi was an extremely rushed project. K-pop groups can spend years training together before debut, and this is critical for their ability to be in sync, but Kaachi only had a few weeks. Second, most of the group weren't trained in K-pop dance, but in other dance styles. This meant that their understanding of facial expressions and K-pop stage presence was understandably lacking, and K-pop fans assume that this equals them being a bad dancer, when really it just means them being an untrained dancer. K-pop dance is notorious for being quite difficult to do from other dance styles, since it's so intensely focused on performance and perfection, but also because it involves singing and rapping at the same time as you dance. So it makes sense that it would have taken the members a little while to adjust to actually performing in this style full time, as opposed to just being part of a cover group. Even Chunso, Danny and Nicole, who had been dancing with Yujin for a while, were still switching between different dance styles in the years leading up to joining Kaachi, and those 3 members had, as far as I'm aware, never been trained on how to dance and sing at the same time. This was something that Danny alluded to in her video, as she mentioned how helpful formal vocal lessons were. This not only led to the group's dance being poorer, but also to their vocals and rap being strained while dancing. This is something that would have been solved by enlisting the members in a formal K-pop training system, as many people pointed out at the time. But of course, Front Row wasn't an established company and it didn't have any industry connections, so it's unsurprising that this didn't happen. Third, there is the fact that since most of the members were in uni and completing other activities, and there were so many lineup changes, it's highly likely that they didn't get many chances to practice the choreography together. I don't dance, but I've heard from cover groups and other groups that dance that practicing together in front of a mirror is mega important for all of the members having good chemistry and being in sync. This is something that we see a lot of on survival shows. If people don't practice together, the performance quality is drastically affected, even if each individual member does a good job. And this almost certainly happened with Kaachi. More time to practice, and especially time to practice together, would no doubt have done them wonders, and Front Row really set them up for failure by making them film the Your Turn music video with such a condensed timeline. Alright, what about the rap and vocals? Well, similar situation. As far as I'm aware, none of the members of Kaachi had received vocal and rap training before joining the group, and as I said, they would have had previously little to no experience singing and dancing at the same time. This lack of training, combined with stressful conditions, a condensed schedule, and the poor vocal mixing, which Johnny explains well in his video, means it's unsurprising that Kaachi's vocals and rap were lacking at debut. But, as with their dance, these things improved drastically as the group aged and had more time to train and practice together, and combined with Johnny's advice and occasional production, and thus songs and direction which suited them better, Kaachi became far better very quickly. Similarly, their music video production and music production was really poor, but improved massively from Your Turn to Photo Magic. Photo Magic was still clearly low budget, but it did smart things with said budget, like giving the girls unique and glamorous makeup and making smart use of set and lighting. As far as accusations made against the group, well, I already discussed how they didn't say anything bad about Jennie, didn't compare themselves to Hwasa, and didn't plagiarize other groups. I've also discussed how their lacking dance, stage presence, rap and vocals were likely caused less by them being trash and more by the rushed schedule and lack of training they received at Front Row. There was no evidence for any of the other rumours about them apart from how their company had worked with Oli London. But were Kaachi Koreaboos? Because that was the big thing said against them. Well, there's this interesting post on Reddit which complains that Kaachi were just as bad as Oli London, and that both were Koreaboos, and hilariously this person says that they even think that Coco, a literal Korean, is a Koreaboo. As you'd expect, even though the comments were unfavourable to Kaachi and Oli London, they also pointed out how the working definition of Koreaboo literally means that it's impossible to be a Koreaboo if you're Korean. Duh. On the off chance that someone is watching this video who doesn't know what a Koreaboo is, they're someone who isn't Korean but wants to be Korean or otherwise pretends to be Korean. I see this accusation levelled most often against people who are white or Southeast Asian, specifically Indonesian or Filipino, but it can realistically apply to literally anyone who isn't Korean. But it can't apply to Korean people, which is why it was so weird that this one person was calling Coco a Koreaboo. Now for the rest of them. Danny and Chunso got this the hardest. Chunso because she had a Korean stage name, and Danny because she was the British member of the group. Nicole was shielded somewhat by her skill level. But the fact of the matter is, outside of this one unusual accusation towards Coco, the other 3 Kaachi members were plagued with insane numbers of Koreaboo accusations. But were they really Koreaboos? Well, Oli London definitely is, or definitely was, a Koreaboo. He got surgery to try and look like Jimin and spent a lot of time in Korea obsessively doing Korean things and trying to convince himself that he actually looked and thus had become Korean. On the other hand, Kaachi never claimed they were Korean and always framed themselves as being a UK K-pop group, which in my opinion wasn't the best marketing, but which was clearly supposed to be a K-pop style group made in the UK, as opposed to being a Korean group. The UK was literally in their tagline. Similarly, they were always very open about the fact that the members were K-pop fans, and outside of Coco weren't Korean and didn't know the language and were in the process of learning it. And acknowledging these points, in my opinion, instantly showed that they understood how they weren't Korean. I mean, honestly, I just think that the documentary seriously ruined their image, because you can't really see Kaachi, apart from maybe a few posts. At the start of their careers, they don't really promote themselves as a K-pop group. It gets better over time, and they do it less so over time, but even at the start, it wasn't that bad. But the Channel 4 documentary acts like they're a K-pop group and they're on the same level as other K-pop groups, and it includes Oli London and calls him a K-pop star. Like, the Channel 4 documentary just is terrible, and it probably completely destroyed their image because it made them look like they were so full of themselves and made them look like Koreaboos when they actually weren't, and they weren't necessarily pretending they were on the same level. The Channel 4 documentary, it just reads like a whole bunch of old white people trying to understand teenage girls or something. Kaachi's Twitter account literally posted in Spanish, which makes sense since 2 members have Spanish heritage, and this was yet another point showing how they weren't Koreaboos. The big thing that K-pop fans pointed to when calling Kaachi Koreaboos were 1. How they sang in Korean in their songs without knowing Korean, and 2. Chunso's stage name. And this is pretty shitty evidence in my opinion. Chunso's stage name was literally created because her real name wasn't accessible to Korean speakers, and it would have been pretty rude to make Korean speakers who were part of the market for Kaachi just struggle with her name. It was created out of necessity as opposed to delusion, let's just say that. As far as singing Korean in their songs, well, I mean, Coco speaks Korean, or at least I assume she does, since she was born and lived there for a long time and has spoken Korean in interviews. The other 3 members were open about their wish to learn more Korean and learn more about Korean, and spend a lot of time in Korea. And also, guys, does speaking a language make you want to become that nationality? I don't think so. I think that if we call Kaachi Koreaboos because they sang in Korean without knowing the language, we need to call literally every cover artist a Koreaboo. And you know what? We can even extend that to ourselves. Have you ever sung along to a K-pop song or lip-synced in the shower even though you don't speak Korean? Well, I guess you're a Koreaboo now. This is yet another example of how hypocritical K-pop fans can be and how their standards will change. Kaachi were doing pretty much normal fan things a lot of the time, but they were called Koreaboos because they stood out too much. And this hit too close to home for many fans, especially fans based in London. But I'll talk about that more in section 4. Anyway, Kaachi did show that they weren't just singing in Korean to be Korean, because they transitioned quickly to singing in Spanish too, showing that languages became more representative of the various group members, rather than a way to change race or anything wacky like that. K-pop fans to this day still dislike Atti/Kaachi, and they think they're Koreaboos, as well as believing many of the rumours around them, such as the fandom name debacle. But I think that even though they weren't managed well and didn't have enough success to actually make much of an impact, they did end up finding their style and place as a Spanish-British-Korean group. And it makes me feel warm inside to think of how much the members grew over their time in both groups, and now have an actual niche they can fill rather than just an army of haters. a literal army considering how many armies hated on them. But the fact of the matter was that Kaachi were never bad dancers, bad singers, bad rappers, or bad anything really. They were just untrained girls with a super short amount of time to actually train and practice, and a company that sabotaged them with poor marketing and music mixing. Even the music itself wasn't that bad, it was just how it was mixed and presented. K-pop fans are used to such insane levels of perfection that they are seemingly unable to understand the fact that just because someone can't dance like Taemin doesn't mean they're a trash dancer. Holy moly. Fun fact, this was the case with Bahie too, and is the case with a good chunk of hated idols. So with that said, let's discuss the legacy and impact of Kaachi. I said at the start that I think Kaachi paved the way for groups like Cat's Eye. Now it's time for me to back that claim up. So what is paved the way? Well, a lot of fans will argue a lot of different things to try and make the label apply to their favourite groups, but at the end of the day, I think that paving the way is supposed to mean that you make something easier for other people to do. This is literally how we use the term in conversations outside of K-pop anyway, and this is the definition you get if you look it up online as well, so we'll go with that. How did Kaachi make it easier for groups like Cat's Eye and Vicha? Well, HYBE, SM and JYP were probably planning their global group projects quite far in advance of when they actually aired their programs and made their groups. But one thing that no doubt would have been on their minds, and one of the reasons that it took so long for these groups to actually be made, is how international and Korean fans alike would receive groups with literal white people in them, or non-Asian people to be more broad. K-pop fans, especially international fans, seem to have this intense need to gatekeep who can or cannot be a K-pop idol based on race, and this is, of course, hypocritical, since when someone from America, Europe, or even Southeast Asia becomes an idol, the accusation is always that they're taking the K out of K-pop. But in that case, what about Chinese and Japanese idols who have been in the industry for decades now? Well, for them it seems acceptable because they're close enough. But what is close enough? China, Korea and Japan all have very distinct languages and cultures, and this has created conflict between them throughout history. So to say that they're similar enough and close enough that Chinese and Japanese idols are okay but Indonesian ones aren't is really weird to me. I just want to put a little aside in here, speaking about Chinese and Japanese idols, that they didn't used to be accepted as much. For instance, we have the whole controversy with that guy who was in Super Junior who was Chinese, and he had to wear a mask on Korean TV shows because they weren't allowed to see his like dastardly Chinese face or something. So we can see that the first few Chinese idols have really made life easier for Chinese idols these days, because although they still experience xenophobia, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Same case exists with Japanese idols, etc, right? And I'm about to talk about a similar thing to do with Kaachi, where Kaachi had a similar effect, but I also want to bring attention to this YouTube video that I watched the other day, which I think came out pretty recently, which talked about the same situation in terms of black idols and from a black person's perspective. Now, obviously I'm not black, so I think it's really interesting and cool how we have this progression of idols over time, and how each group of idols who aren't Korean is paving the way for other idols that are their race. So we can talk about Chinese idols with Super Junior, and we can talk about white people in terms of Kaachi, and we can talk about black idols in terms of Alex, Fatu, etc. So I'm going to link that video in the description, and I'd recommend you watch it because it discusses similar things and it's interesting to get a perspective that's not mine, right? Anyway, Hybe, SM and JYP had no doubt seen how non-East Asian idols had been treated in the past, and there have been many instances of idols being bullied or otherwise hated for having a non-East Asian or even non-Korean ethnicity, so they wanted to be able to guarantee that these groups would be received well. Luckily for them, they didn't have to test the waters as much, because several groups did it for them: SB19, Rania, and most importantly for this video, Kaachi. SB19 were a great example of how fans would accept an entirely non-Korean group from a different country, so long as they had been trained to the same standards as K-pop. Rania were a great example of how black idols would be treated in the industry, as Alex, who was the first black idol, or in this case mixed race, experienced exclusion and racism in her group. Alex took the fall for being the first black idol in the industry, and thus Kaachi, Dear Alice and Vicha didn't have to worry about receiving quite as much hate. Although I don't want in any way to pretend that the members of these groups haven't received racist hate. But Alex bore the initial barrage, and then Kaachi received Koreaboo hate, and Fatu received the rest of the initial racism barrage, especially for being a dark-skinned black woman. So basically, Kaachi were far more salient than many other Koreaboo artists in the past, like Oli London, and they seemed far more serious than Oli London. It was easy to ignore Oli because his content seemed satirical, but it was hard to ignore Kaachi because they were actually doing all of the things a K-pop group did, and more importantly, they were a group, not a soloist, groups being far more salient and popular on average than soloists in Korea. They also hit the English-speaking internet pretty hard, with lots of articles about them, especially in England. Kaachi also had the benefit, as far as paving the way goes, of being, as K-pop fans saw it, unskilled and poorly produced. This meant that Kaachi, Vicha, and to a lesser extent Black Swan had the benefit of being better than Kaachi, and thus more likely to be accepted by fans. This is the idea that if you present an audience with something bad, they'll hate it, and then you can put in less effort to produce something that's only marginally better as opposed to creating an actually good product in the first place. This isn't to say that Vicha, Black Swan, Kaachi, and even other groups like Dear Alice are bad. Far from it. But do you really think that K-pop fans would be as accepting of those groups as they are now if Kaachi and Alex hadn't debuted first? Especially Dear Alice, who are all British and majority white. I mean, Dear Alice also have the benefit of being a boy group and thus more liked on average, but I imagine the reception for them would be far colder if they had come before Kaachi. Hopefully you get my point by now. Kaachi took the brunt of the hate and did the brunt of the experimenting with marketing and language, so that other groups could thrive later. And while I'm not so sure about Vicha considering recent news, and Dear Alice are very new, I would definitely say that Kaachi and Black Swan are in peak condition right now, certainly for Black Swan compared to their past and Rania. It's even possible that the reason the NCT Hollywood subunit was announced and then never followed through with was because of how much hate Kaachi got, although it's very likely that there were also several other factors involved. Honestly, Hybe, SM and JYP were probably rubbing their greedy little hands together in glee when Kaachi debuted and took all the hate for being trash, because they knew that as long as they produced a slightly less white group and a slightly less trash group, they'd be received and perceived far better by fans. This is likely one of the reasons they also emphasised how their trainees had been through the K-pop training system, because they saw how much better SB19 was received compared to Kaachi, and the presence of the K-pop training system was a big factor in these differing receptions. Dream Academy and Dear Alice's documentaries were covered in references to the K-pop system and how their trainees were trained in the Korean system, and how they had Korean trainers, and in the case of Kaachi, how they had Bang PD, and it was all Korean and Korea, Korea, Korea. Yep. I feel like I've been rambling quite a lot, but I genuinely do think that Kaachi were one of, if not the biggest group to factor in the growth of global groups in the industry lately. Had Kaachi or Vicha, or especially Dear Alice, sprung out of nowhere in 2020, I'm sure the fans would have been far less receptive to them. but now they compare favourably to Kaachi. Kaachi may not have been brilliant at debut, but their debut was all the industry needed to improve on. And the fact that Kaachi continued to develop quietly in the background didn't really matter because the important work had already been done. Not to mention that Big Four privilege is real, and K-pop fans were always more likely to accept a global group from a Big Four company who they like and trust, as opposed to some random tiny new company in London which has associations with Oli London of all people. So with that, let's talk a little bit about some key takeaways from Kaachi/Atti and their time in the industry. Or time not in the industry. What did we learn from Kaachi? Well, first we learned that K-pop fans are far more likely to accept a global group if they're trained in the K-pop system and if they're from a big company. On the same note, don't trust a small company with no experience managing groups, especially if the CEO is potentially buddies with Oli London. I know I haven't discussed her tons in this episode, but Monica is seriously a weird and suspicious figure. She created this tiny company which was very manipulative with her trashy management of the group, potentially kicked Danny out of the group, may well have been a reason why KG and Miso's leaving the group was so sensitive that Ploopy had to blur it out, and she has repeatedly lied and gaslit Kaachi fans and haters alike through her statements and Kaachi's accounts. For more information on these kinds of things, you can watch the videos linked in the description which detail Kaachi's relationship with Oli London, which, spoiler alert, seems to mostly be Monica's weird relationship with Oli London. Not to mention that by making this relationship public and involving Oli London in Kaachi's debut, Monica must have known she was sabotaging the group. The past and present members of Kaachi aren't 100% innocent in this, but most of them were young K-pop fans who wanted a shot at being idols, and Monica was their CEO who had power over them and their exposure to the public. I have obvious skepticism for Oli London's description of Monica as abusive, rude, and entitled, but as much as I think he's greatly exaggerating, I wouldn't be surprised if there was at least a grain of truth to these accusations. Honestly, it sounds like Oli London and Monica just deserve each other. So, here's another K-pop CEO to not trust. But if you're surprised at this point when a CEO turns out to be a bad person, you must be new here. We also learned that K-pop does indeed follow the bounce back kind of logic that many other industries do. I'm not sure if bounce back is a good term for it, and it almost certainly has a technical term I'm not aware of, but for another recent example, let's take a look at League of Legends. They charged $500 USD for a faker skin for Ari, and fans were obviously enraged, but because the $500 skin had been so outrageous, Riot then transitioned into creating $250 skins instead, and since we knew how bad they could be with their $500 skins, many fans felt that the $250 was vaguely more acceptable. This is a horridly psychologically manipulative business practice, and Hybe, SM, and JYP were able to take full advantage of it unintentionally through Kaachi. Beware of these kinds of business practices, and businesses psychologically manipulating you in general. Mind you, that is like the entire basis of capitalism, and K-pop is well and truly rooted in capitalism, so good luck. I think that Kaachi also showed how racist and misogynistic K-pop fans could be. You can't convince me that Kaachi would have received nearly as much hate if they were a boy group, because then at least they would make people nostalgic for One Direction and other things. But as a girl group, especially with 4 members and the comparisons to Blackpink, well, aren't Blinks kind of known for being misogynistic? As far as racism, well, I genuinely believe that one of the reasons Chunso was hated so much was because she was half Filipino, Southeast Asian people being a group that a lot of K-pop fans, especially in America and Europe, seem to have an extreme bias against. Just look at Vanessa from Universe Ticket, Ling Ling on Island, and Jelly from Eunice. Or for some slightly older examples, you could even look at Lisa, Sorn, and Minnie. Also, don't forget that racism can be applied to any racial group. I wouldn't call what happened to Nicole and Danny racism towards white people, because I don't think the people sending the racial hate actually thought they were better than Nicole and Danny racially. but it was definitely close, and definitely very concerning, especially since a lot of that came from white people themselves. And they definitely thought they were better than Nicole and Danny morally. Speaking of race, on the flip side, Kaachi were yet another example of how much K-pop fans will bend over backwards to deify and infantilize Korean people. Coco was massively infantilized, and all of her agency was taken away by haters who acted like, as a Korean person, she had no understanding of the horrors of Kaachi and was innocent to UK culture. This was, disgustingly, something that was perpetuated by the company through their presentation of her. On one hand, I'm not surprised that people got this image of her considering how she was portrayed, but on the other hand, we see K-pop fans time and time again infantilize K-pop idols because they're cute Koreans. Coco was also, as with most Koreans, deified by K-pop fans. For many, she could do no wrong in comparison to the other members, was the only one worthy of being in the group, and was single-handedly saving them with her Koreanness, and the other members had better be grateful. Look, the stereotype that K-pop fans are obsessed with Korean people and think Korean people are superior is a stereotype, but stereotypes exist for a reason, and just because the vast majority of fans aren't obsessed with Koreans doesn't mean that a vocal minority, the minority we saw hating on Kaachi, aren't. Moving on, but still related, this also showed how hypocritical K-pop fans can be. I talked earlier about how K-pop fans were convinced, or rather convinced themselves, that Kaachi were Koreaboos, even though Kaachi didn't really do anything that other K-pop fans haven't done. As I said earlier, if you think Kaachi singing in Korean despite not knowing the language makes them Koreaboos, well, you better stop lip-syncing right now, I guess. Finally, we learned about the importance of good marketing, production, and training. I shouldn't need to tell you that these things are important, but the K-pop industry is, as we know, polished to perfection, and I think Kaachi show how much we take a lot of K-pop companies and their marketing for granted. There are obviously K-pop companies whose marketing is really bad, but Kaachi showed the importance of the K-pop training system, and how blatant a lack of training and a lack of production polish could really be, when netizens were already primed to hate the group. As I mentioned earlier, I genuinely believe that part of the reason Kaachi got so much hate, especially from American and European fans, was because they were confidently and joyfully achieving their dream as K-pop fans. People who hated on them based on what we know of K-pop fans are likely the same ones who have fantasies of being an idol and meeting their faves, of being BTS's 8th member or whatever else. I feel like they're the ones who make those, quote, "if I was a K-pop idol" posts, without having any actual sense of how hard and long idols train to become as skilled as they are, and without any idea of how hard it can be to be an idol. Hence, they see Kaachi, whose skills are at a high level, but whose skills are still at a fan level, not an idol level, and they get mad. Kaachi broke the illusion of K-pop for lots of people, and showed how, actually, you, some random girl from London, will not just get scouted for a K-pop group and instantly start slaying the stage without any hard work. And when something makes people feel vulnerable or breaks illusions in the same way that Kaachi did, these people get upset. This is exactly why dating scandals exist, and people say that they would have been okay with Kaachi if they had just been marketed as a K-pop inspired group or a global group, not a K-pop group. But I think for several reasons, and primarily this one, that they would have been just as hated regardless. The idea that they should have called themselves a K-pop inspired group was just a way for a lot of people to justify their hate for Kaachi. Some people who said it were actually just offering constructive criticism, but they were in the vast minority. Hence, Kaachi were hated, but you know that by now. I'm not telling you anything new if you have even the tiniest scrap of a critical lens through which to view K-pop. And that's one of the reasons I find Kaachi so fascinating. They were hated, but they were never truly bad, and they grew wonderfully into their own niche, being brought down largely by poor management. If you stan Cat's Eye, Dear Alice or Vicha, you owe Kaachi a thank you, and you should also probably thank Rania/Black Swan/Alex and SB19 too, just for politeness' sake and to be thorough. So to summarise, Don't believe misinformation, take everything with a grain of salt, and if a debut is terrible, just remember that everything is salvageable and can improve. We've seen that time and time again in this industry. Also, remember that a lot of K-pop fans are borderline insane and are very racist, misogynistic, and just mean in general. And definitely don't trust CEOs ever. So with that, we're finally at the end of the video. Will there be a part 2 going down the Monica, Kaachi, Oli London rabbit hole? I hope not, and considering other people have already done that, I don't really feel the need to, but the possibility's always there, and I guess that thought is scarier than Oli London himself. So let's wrap up the video. Kaachi was, as they described themselves, a UK K-pop group initially made up of 4 members, Nicole, Coco, Danny and Chunso, who debuted in 2020 and disbanded in 2023. The group received massive amounts of hate at debut and were plagued by poor management and marketing, and some questionable business choices and relationships, most notably with Oli London. They were also attacked simultaneously and in coordinated ways by several fandoms, with lots of misinformation and rumours being spread. Rumours which were so widespread that some K-pop fans still believe them 5 years later. Despite these rocky beginnings, the group transitioned to a Korean, British, Spanish group and vastly improved their skills and the quality of their productions, which, after the haters left, led them to having a small but dedicated fan base. However, the members did slowly leave the company until the group disbanded in 2023. A second independent group, Atti, was created by 3 of the members in 2023 and released 2 songs which were very well received by Kaachi fans, but Atti and all of the Atti members have been inactive for several months or longer now. The most active ex-Kaachi member is now Danny, who is doing lots of travel and has continued to learn Korean and develop her Korean and vocal skills. The company behind the group Front Row seems incredibly sketchy and manipulative, and the CEO Monica seems to embody these traits. The company was nowhere near experienced enough to manage such a big project, and was also clearly either unable or unwilling, or both, to keep up with the demands of Kaachi as a group, especially when they got more popular. Kaachi took the brunt of hatred that a lot of K-pop fans had for international groups, which led to other groups like Cat's Eye and Dear Alice being received far more favourably in comparison, showing how major K-pop companies were able to take advantage of Kaachi's failures and the gimmicks of the K-pop industry to benefit their own groups. Hence, I would argue that, as much as K-pop fans hate them, they should also thank Kaachi, who helped pave the way for their faves. At the end of the day, Kaachi, as a group and as 4 individuals, had a very interesting artistic transition from being awkwardly shoved into the K-pop label to forging their own concept and path as a unique group. Although there are still many issues with the group, and especially the management behind it, it's clear that Kaachi certainly didn't deserve all of the hate that was thrown at them, and were genuinely interesting, if a horribly mismanaged project. There are so many interesting rabbit holes and facts to do with the group that I haven't even managed to get into all of them today, and I wish the best for Kaachi and Atti members in the future. I'm really curious to see what, if anything, they do with their publicity from the group, although honestly I think Atti has gone down the drain as well. The disconnect between Kaachi's hated time in the industry and their widespread legacy is fascinating to me, and also how the misinformation around them is still so prevalent in K-pop communities. Their career was nothing if not interesting. So I hope that I've been able to set the record at least somewhat straight about Kaachi and demonstrate both the positives and negatives of the group and members with a relatively objective stance. But that's the end of this episode. Thank you for watching, I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.